Welcome back everyone. Hi, if you're new, my name is Tori and welcome to 2022. I'm wishing all of you guys a happy new year and I hope you have an amazing reading year in 2022. So I typically don't make videos like this, like tips and tricks and how to do X, Y, and Z. It's not for me, not something that I often do, but I've had a few people in my personal life express that they either want to make reading more of a priority or they just want to get back into reading in the new year. So I thought it would be helpful just to sit down and share some practical tips on how to read more, how to make reading more of a priority in 2022 if that is one of your New Year's resolutions or goals for the year, and just how to rediscover your love of reading or fall in love with reading and books for the first time if that sounds like you. I feel like this video is not going to apply to the general book community like at all, because just, you know, constantly being in the community, knowing what your book friends are reading and just being surrounded by books and being aware of, you know, what's out there, you just naturally tend to read a lot more, and it's been the case for me over the last several years. So I read 56 books in 2021 and I feel like, you know, in the grand scheme of the book community that number is pretty low, but I have found that the 50 to 60 range is realistic for me, and it has been that way for the last few years or so. There are some years where I do tend to read a little bit more, where I can like get up to 70, but that's usually if I'm, you know, incorporating more short stories or graphic novels or short story collections or plot driven novels that just naturally tend to move faster. But I physically read all of my books, and I'm reading books that are about 350 to 400 pages on average. And for me, my reading speed, my life, that just naturally equates to about 50 to 60 books, sometimes more or less, every single year. So I'm going to share with you some tips and habits to start incorporating into your life to help you read more, and then also share a little bit about my own reading habits towards the end of the video if that will be helpful. So I hope you guys enjoy this video. Let's get started. First tip that I want to talk about is to take time and rediscover your reading tastes. I feel like this tip in particular specifically applies to people who are trying to get back into reading. If you haven't read anything in a year, 2 years, 3 years, you know, chances are you're a pretty different person than you were back then, and your reading tastes have been evolving and you're not even realizing it. So even though the books you read years ago have a special place in your heart, and they probably always will, picking up those same books now are not going to bring you the same excitement or give you the same feelings or motivation to keep reading that they did when you read them at that time. I feel like if you're trying to discover or rediscover your reading tastes, there are so many bookish apps out there that are really perfect for this. One in particular that I've really been enjoying recently, especially for this feature of trying to find new books to read, is the Storygraph. I think people like the Storygraph for a lot of different reasons, whether it's the breakdown of, you know, the little charts that you get that tell you about your reading habits and the kinds of books that you like to read, or whether you use it for content warnings. But I personally love the Storygraph for its recommendations and the fact that you can filter out what you're in the mood for. Let's say you've grown out of your reading tastes from several years ago, but you know you love books that are a little bit on the darker side, a little bit more atmospheric. You love books that are a little bit more fast-paced. You can search through all of that in Storygraph and it'll populate a list of unique recommendations for you, and you can really just go from there. Another great way to do this is if you have a local library or if you have a local bookstore that you can stop into to go browse and just look at those different genres in those sections, whether it's thriller or nonfiction, literary fiction, sci-fi, and fantasy, and just, you know, get a visual for what is out there, what the landscape looks like for that genre, and just really take it from there. So the first tip is just to discover or rediscover the things that you like to read. The next tip that I have is to carve out the same amount of time every single day to read. Not the same time every day, the same amount of time. So it doesn't matter if it's 10 minutes long, just read for the same amount of time every single day. I think this tip is going to be really helpful for people who want to make reading more of a habit. What's that saying that you do something for like 30 days or 15 days? If you do it long enough, it becomes habit. I don't care if you're physically cracking a book open, you're pressing play on an audiobook, you're powering up your e-reader, it doesn't matter. I just think it's helpful for you to get your mind in that routine that you're gonna read for a certain amount of time every single day. And then when time goes on, you'll be reading for 20 minutes, half an hour. an hour if you can spare it, and it keeps adding up like that. The next tip that I have is to start getting into audiobooks. Audiobooks are definitely having a moment right now, and rightfully so. I think they are so great for people who are extremely busy, going to school, going to work, and just, you know, tasks of everyday life, running errands, cooking yourself dinner, cleaning up, taking care of kids. If you can, pop in your headphones, pop in an audiobook, or put your audiobook up on a speaker or Bluetooth or something, and just live your everyday normal life with your audiobook playing in the background. I think that is such a seamless way to start incorporating stories back into your life. I'm trying to get more comfortable with listening to audiobooks as well. I only tend to listen to audiobooks of books that I've already read physically. I feel like that's a fun way to experience the story again, and just, I'm not an auditory learner like by any stretch of the imagination, so just listening to an audiobook from beginning to end and that holding my attention, it doesn't do it. I zone out for 30 seconds and I'm just like, I have no idea what just happened. And so I feel like in the long run for me, listening to audiobooks is almost counterproductive because I spend so much time like rewinding and being like, who is this character? The next tip that I have is a big one, and I feel like it's a really obvious one, but it is so much easier said than done, and I'm still working on it. And so that is to swap your screen time for page time. I had to turn my screen time notifications off because it was getting a little embarrassing how much time I was being notified I was spending on certain apps. I'm not telling you guys anything new. Your screen time adds up. It adds up, and it is, sometimes it is a lot. Just times that you think are like throwaway moments where you're waiting for your pasta water to heat up, or you're waiting on the train, or I don't know, you're doing whatever, where you're on the couch just kind of scrolling. Like, your time definitely adds up, and if you have a visual of that, you can just get a better idea of where you're tossing these extra minutes. 5 minutes on TikTok, 20 on Twitter. And I think it's helpful if you do have that visual, as hard as it may be to accept that you're spending like 5 hours a day or whatever on certain apps. Like, that might be helpful for you to see. I think what you'll find with people who tend to read frequently is that they have pretty limited, and this is obviously not everybody, definitely not me, they have pretty limited screen time or limited time when it comes to other things because they are prioritizing what they love. They're prioritizing reading and books and that sort of thing. But obviously spend your time the way you want to. But I'm saying if you want to incorporate more books into your life, more reading into your life, it might be worthwhile to evaluate how that time is being spent and where you can, you know, shift some things around and where you can put an extra 20 minutes here or 30 minutes there in your day. The next thing that I recommend is to have something with you to read when you go out, whether that's a physical book, whether you have your e-reader, you can download the Kindle app or the Nook app, or, you know, if you have the means, download Scribd, which is $9.99 a month. You can read on Scribd, you can listen to audiobooks on Scribd. And I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you and be like, you can read so much in the line at Starbucks while you wait for your coffee. Like, no, I don't even do that. You know, just get in the habit of having something with you, because you really don't know when you're gonna have like that extra downtime. I personally always have my Kindle with me. It doesn't matter where I am. I could only just be going to the grocery store. My Kindle is in my purse. Always. And finally, the last tip that I have is just to read at your own pace. The quantity of books does not matter. And I really say this for mostly younger readers who are either coming into the book community, whether it's on YouTube or TikTok or wherever you, or Instagram, wherever you find a book community. Experience stories at your own pace and just have fun with it. I've seen so many people come into different book communities and get overwhelmed because they feel like they're not reading enough. That's not a real thing. Not reading enough is not, read what you want to read how much you want to read, but don't let yourself get overwhelmed by that. Reading is not about that. The books will always be there for you, so just take your time. And honestly, I've had to catch myself with that so many times. Not like, oh my God, people are reading so much around me and I've only read 2 books. Like, not in that sense, but more like, especially if I'm reading books that are a lot thicker, like if I'm reading a tome or a huge tome, something that's like 700, 800 pages, sometimes I get in the mindset of, oh my God, like in the time it's taking me to read this one book, I could have read 3, or I could have been through this novel like so much faster. And so in the past, I've really had to remind myself, like, no, put your attention on this book right here, focus on that, let's stay here, and move on to the next book when you get the chance. So just enjoy the story that you pick up, give that your full attention, and then move on to the next one at your own pace when you want to. So those are the tips that I have. I hope those are helpful to some of you who are looking to, you know, make reading more of a habit in the new year, or rediscover your love of reading this year. So hope you did enjoy that. As far as my reading habits go, so a while ago I had someone comment, I think it's like a year ago, maybe little more than a year ago, I had someone comment and ask, because I made a comment in one of my, like a throwaway comment in a wrap up about, like, I tend to read 5 to 7 books a month, and that's like my normal, sometimes more, sometimes less, but typically I read about 5 to 7 books a month. I remember someone commented on that video asking, how do you read 5 to 7 books a month? Like, how does that look for you over the course of 4 weeks? And my own reading habits, I think, are pretty solid at this point. So I work 9 to 5. Sometimes it could go longer depending on if I have evening meetings, or, you know, if I'm trying to wrap up some extra work. So like 6:30, 7 some nights. But for the most part, I know that my evenings are for me, like whatever I want to do with them. Most of the time I do read in the evenings, but there are some days where I'm just so mentally exhausted I don't even want to cook dinner, like let alone read. So my reading is kind of up in the air during the week, but if I do read during the week, it is in the evening most times. And then sometimes if I wake up early enough, I tend to wake up between like 6 and 6:30. If I do have some extra time in my morning before I open my laptop for work for the day, I do tend to squeeze in like 20 pages in whatever I'm reading before my workday actually starts. At one point I was a lot better at like starting my morning with coffee and a book and just relaxing than I am now. So, but I will say the majority of my reading for the month tends to come from me reading on the weekends. For the most part, my time on the weekends is really open, and if it's not completely open, it is pretty flexible. So I dedicate a lot of time on the weekends to reading, and that is when I can really just like sink into a book. So I do get a lot of reading done on the weekends. And as I mentioned, I tend to read books that are like between 350 to 400 pages. So I can get through a book in a weekend, and so you do that a couple weekends in a row. Keep reading in the evenings when you can, and that quickly adds up for me to be like 5 to 7 books a month. So that's typically how it goes for me. So that's it for me, you guys. I hope you all enjoyed this video. I really appreciate you for watching it. Do what you will with these tips. It's not obviously end all be all. Like, life is fluid, things change. Don't, you know, don't get so hung up on read 10 minutes every single day. Like, just relax, do you, and just, you know, slowly start incorporating books and reading back into your life day by day, bit by bit, and it'll just become so much more natural as the year goes on. So I hope this is helpful. I hope you have a great reading year in 2022, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.